ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us about kind of what you do so we can get that part out of the way. And then we'll dive into the more personal experience side of it because we kind of need a little bit of background of your admin experience and your work within the system of public education. And then, yeah, so you can take it
I
away.
thought you said we weren't going to do an introduction.
We're not. I'll edit that out probably.
We're not going to do it. Okay. All right. So my name is Sara Sutler-Cohen, and I am the program director for the bachelor's degree in human services at Colorado State University Global. Got my doctorate in 2005 from University of California in Santa Cruz in sociology. And I did my master's at Humboldt State in clinical social science or sociology. So I had already done some applied work in graduate school working with juveniles in the system, and which was close to home for me. And I kind of got away from that because I didn't have like the academic grooming that most people going into a Ph.D. have, like a high school diploma and like accolades from colleges. I just wasn't groomed, I grew up in Berkeley as a working class kid, and I just didn't have nobody in my immediate family went to college, and none of us finished high school. So it was, I wouldn't say bleak, but my path was different, right? And so I really loved the applied work that I did, but it just wasn't the path I got onto. So I entered, I did my doctorate in sociology at Santa Cruz, and from there I was hired at Bellevue College, and I actually got a couple of offers at other universities, but I took the one in Bellevue because I wanted to stay on the West Coast. And I was there actually still teach at Bellevue. As faculty, I chaired the sociology department there. I was dean for a couple of years. And I put on a film festival. I worked really hard. I was quickly disheartened based on some experiences I had there. And even though I still teach there part time, I quit in 2013. I walked away from tenure and I walked away from administration. I picked up work at CSU Global in 2012 because I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to stay in the system, in the university system, try to get another like a tenure track job. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I just knew that I needed to leave Seattle. So I did. And I scooped up my kid, and we moved back to the Bay Area, to the East Bay. And I got a job at San Francisco State University in ethnic studies in Native American Studies department, or American Indian Studies department, I think it's called. And I taught there for 4 years. And while I was still teaching part-time at Bellevue and picking up courses at CSU Global, because I was in this weird transition where I didn't know which way I was going to go, I quickly decided I didn't want another tenure track job. I was done. I just didn't want to do it. And my last in-person job was in 2017 at San Francisco State. So I was teaching in the applied social science program at CSU Global, and there was what's called a lead faculty position, which is kind of a glorified assistant to the chair. And I took that extra work on. I wanted to just test the waters and see if I would want to do administration again, because I really do like the actual work. It can just be soul sucking, I guess is the best way to say it. And so did that for a few years, 5 years, 4 years, something like that. And the chair, or the program director at the time, was stepping down. She wanted me to be, I was sort of being groomed for the job. A few of us applied, and then I got the job, and I've been doing that a little over 2 years now. And at the time, the applied social science bachelor's program actually got sundowned, and then human services became a program, I think, 5 years ago. So I've been doing the program director for that job for the last 2.5 years, and kind of getting back to my roots of doing applied clinical social science. And I'm really feeling like now I'm kind of getting the program to where I want to be, where students are more involved, and creating leadership opportunities for students and creating networking for students, and also doing some mentoring with students and things like that. So that's my long answer to your
That's perfect. So, jumping back to your first time experience, you were talking about not being groomed enough to kind of continue on that track towards like the PhD level and all that kind of stuff. But you did have some um, experience, right, that kind of turned you off of. Why did you end up going into the field of clinical sociology or human services, like helping people directly?
Well, I was a kid that was in the system, and I was a ward of the San Francisco court as a young person. And I had some challenges, and I got a lot of help from some people along the way, and noticed that the people that helped me when I was a kid and I was on the streets in San Francisco and in and out of foster homes and group homes and things like that in juvenile hall, obviously, that's how you get to be a ward of the court. The people that helped me were people that were also at one point in the system. The people that, and this is not to say that this can't be a thing, but in my experience as a young person, the people who didn't have any experience in the system and didn't know what it was like to be poor and hungry and afraid of everything at 13, 12, 14, 16 years old, and being really vulnerable and not having that experience, didn't reach me. Just, I remember those people kind of as like an amorphous blob, like they just don't have substance. I remember every single person that helped me when I was a kid that also had struggles that I did, with drugs, with family challenges, mostly family challenges. And so as I got older, became a parent, a single parent, a young single parent, I kind of had this. There were two things that happened. One is that I never let go of that tether to my youth, that survival tether, and the people that helped me and the people that were there for me, including older people who, at one point, I was in a group home that was split between youths and adults. And there were people there, the adults there, that helped me. And I never forgot that, even though it was kind of like pushed to the back of my mind different periods of time in my life because of life and no other reason, distractions. I just never forgot that. And even now, I just, in my 50s, I it's something that's just, it's kind of like I'm not religious, I'm not even spiritual, but it's this spirit, I guess you could say, that just is always kind of with me, this memory, because it's trauma, and you get through it, hopefully. And if you get through it, I feel like you have a responsibility for the people who are experiencing similar traumas that you went through, to serve them. And that's been my drive my whole life. I've just always been like that. I have a friend whose friend just brutally died of cancer, super fast and super harsh. And the woman's husband is just in shell shock right now. He doesn't have any people, and she's organized a meal train. And it didn't even occur to me to like think about it. I just went, well, I'll make him some bread and I'll bring him over. Sure, yeah, count me in. And it's not because I want the accolades for like doing good things. It's just part of like the very core of who I am. And so to be able to have found a career that I get to like be the core of who I am as part of my job, I think is very fortunate, and also really important as well. And so that just kind of happened. And I sort of, as soon as I saw that pathway back to human services and being of service to others as a career in this position, it was like a no-brainer.
Your experience is so soul feeding. Rarely do you meet someone in any sort of, service position that wasn't inspired to start or explore or give back without the experience like of suffering, of struggle, you know. And so I'm thinking on those that are so memorable for you, did they seem as if they were self-aware of, you know, the advice and wisdom that they were giving, or did it just kind of seem natural to them?
I think it's really hard to answer that because I think you have to be self-aware to know if someone else is self-aware. It's like being able to write memoir, right? Like you can't really write the memoir until you've gone through it. And so it's very similar. So I have no idea. Maybe they were simply because they were able to reach me. I don't know. I think it's yeah. I mean, my self awareness didn't hit till I was in my late 40s. So I don't even, and I'm still kind of in that weird space. So yeah, I don't,
I
can't
definitely
answer
ask because we do try so hard to, for students especially, or anyone in training, to become like a human service professional, right? There's an emphasis on being able to know yourself, understand where your weaknesses are and your strengths, how you communicate, a lot of self-reflection that um, is well necessary, not necessarily always taught per se or that directive, but um, I was wondering, like, can you tell from the other side, you know, if someone can serve you in a way that is super impactful? I guess that doesn't come with a sticker that says, I've done my self-reflection and my inner seeking, and I know, therefore I can give, right? It
that.
usually always just comes from that experience that they have that brought them there, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
So
I don't think you can tell. I mean,
yeah,
I feel like there's it is all about connection, right?
mhm,
Whether you connect with somebody, because we've all had lovers, friends, acquaintances in our lives where sometimes there's a connection and sometimes there's not. And sometimes you don't even know why that is, right? And sometimes you think somebody, like all these puzzle pieces fit really, really well. Why aren't we a good match? Why are we not a fit? And so I think these are questions, these are sort of like some of the bigger questions in life that are really hard to suss out.
we like can grow up in a system where we're looking for metrics to measure exactly how well we've done in, you know, whatever the task may be. And if we center the task of self-reflection and inner knowing as like a just strictly a task where there are measurable metrics that we all share,
Yeah.
that can be very dangerous and the human services professional, because we don't want to overemphasize this, you know, false simplicity of knowing thyself, and then, you know, go out there and expect our clients or the people we serve to tell us like, hey, do I seem in like my inner knowing is strong today? Is it reflecting in my service to you? Like, um, it's good to talk about simply on the fact of like, let's comfort each other. There isn't a right way to do this, but it's reflective in your experiences, my experiences, that we can do better giving to others. And it's very instinctual to a certain degree. It's different for all people when we can come from a place in our heart that knows, okay, I see this person, I see me in this person, I see what they, you know, went through or going through right now. Yeah, I touched on that cold solid surface myself. Um, so I just want to get straight to the favorite part of our last conversation, and that was about, you had said something that was super compelling for me because I've said these very words too. When people used to ask me like, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" In my late 20s, once I kind of figured out people were my thing, right? I wanted to save the world, and I always say that
I know
jokingly.
where you're going.
Yeah,
You're gonna make me say this.
um, I am. This is what they need to hear. I got to share your story. And you said those words in context last time, and I was like, damn, like there is that mindset that is easy to hang on to, and to want to and to nurture and care for, and that is like, I'm going to do everything I possibly can under the sun, moon, and stars to be of service. Now, I have my reasons for kind of derailing and backtracking on the ways I think of what that statement means, but I'd like you to share a little bit about how you came into your work with that mindset, and then what kind of changed it?
There are a couple things, right? Like, we went to the NOS conference, right? And there were on more than one occasion, I heard people ask, like, how can I get people to let me in, and nobody will let me help them, and I want to help so bad. And I feel like there's this, like this drive to help people, but if people are not ready to be helped, or not ready to be helped by you, which is the big like, right? You have to accept it. You can't force people to take your help, and maybe your help isn't what they need. Maybe it's this guy's help that they need instead, or this person's or hers or whatever. Like you, so again, it just goes back to that connective moment, whether or not you connect with people. But short of repeating what I had said before, but I guess like I came out of graduate school when I was 35, so nearly 20 years ago, which is strange for me to say out loud. And I was so excited to reach people. And I felt that I was really excited if I got to one student. So I've been at this for 20 years. I've been teaching. I started teaching in 2000 and 1999 rather. And so fast forward decades later, I feel like I got to the point where I was really frustrated that I only reached one person in a class, or in a semester, or in a quarter, or in a year. It went from, rose colored glasses, just super excited to reach that one person. And then over the course of time, realizing that I'm reaching people who are willing to be reached. Except for a couple of occasions where I shared those couple of stories with you, that's the reality. And to me, it was a bit of it's kind of a shakabuku, right? Like a spiritual kick to the head where you realize how both insignificant and significant you can be as a helping person. And it really took that realization. Like I went from being super depressed about that realization and frustrated by it, like why bother, to feeling like, the work is worth doing. And if I give up, then what's the point of ever having done anything that I've ever done, right? And so I find other ways to be of service. And it's not always in my job, right? I'm a DJ, as you also know. I have a rock and roll radio show, and for the past almost 2 months straight, there's been a war in Ukraine, Russian aggression in Ukraine, and I started doing shows. I did a Ukraine metal show and reached out to all the bands, and I had already played some Ukrainian bands. It wasn't new for me, but I've now become more invested in it, because now I've forged friendships with people, and people are sending me messages that are just gobsmacking. Like I can't even believe. There's one band whose guitarist was kidnapped by Russian forces, and this guy was like a civilian. They broke his legs and dumped him without any medical care. They had him for a month. This is the stuff that people, we're not going to hear in the news, but I'm hearing because people are telling me these things. And I share this with you to say that these are horrible things, but I think that my awareness would not be as open if I had not kind of had the realization of being significant and insignificant and having that be meaningful some years ago, recently, really. Because I had to figure out a way to, like, this is my career. I got another, decade of working at least before I retire. I'm not going to go through the rest of my career being just pissed off and miserable because I'm frustrated, right? And so, how do you've got to figure out a way to make meaning, and maybe that was part of my process of self-actualization and realizing that you can't force people to accept your help. You So therefore, you can't always be of service, and it has to be okay. So that narrative, I think, is really important when we think about being helping people, um, helping people in capital letters, like as a proper noun. We are helping people, um, because you cannot, I can't give assistance without being authentic to myself. And I had to really do some soul searching about why I do what I do so that I can continue like doing that work. Is that what you were looking for?
Sorry, I'm like gushing from the eyeballs real quick. We can just
Does I make you
let's
cry?
cut
What
it
if
there.
I do? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you made me cry. Oh no, it's okay. No, it's totally fine. And it feels good. It's like a good cry. It's like a found you in the dark kind of cry, just because it is very, it's comforting as much as someone might want a direct answer, right, to any of this kind of these confusing questions that come up along the journey of becoming of service to others, whether it's career or just non-professional ways of doing
Yeah.
so. It's these are all situations and experiences that these are the metrics I was mentioning earlier, right? But we are not ever going to share those. But when we do come close, you get those feelings of like I just had, like, ah, yes, yes, you're speaking the words of my heart, my mind that have gone through, definitely not the same experiences, but, you know, chances where you are faced with like the reality of your significance and why I find that so crucial, especially to students, no matter where you're starting from, is that we live in a neoliberal society that is very, very much keen to the metrics in your role, like making sure that you meet certain standards, and but taking all of
Mm-hmm.
that on your own. Like it
Yeah.
is up to you and you alone. Any faulty mishap or misstep is on you as well. And so, back to my point, like it's a comforting, as the best word I can come up with, but it's comforting to share these experiences, not just with you, but with all of our viewers, who a lot of them are students. Um, so they can just kind of sense like, oh, okay, all right, cool. All right, I don't have a direction. I don't have the answers. It's fine. I'm going to keep
And it's
going
fine.
because,
Totally. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
It's
we
totally
have to like
okay.
give ourselves this permission to let things like that be okay.
Mhm.
Um, because if we don't, then we risk not giving our clients or our families or our friends or the world, the people in our world around us, the permission to be themselves.
Yeah.
Um, that meaning making. So we haven't touched on this, but I want to touch on two key terms that I think are super important that are kind of left out of the dialogue when it comes to human services in general, and that's meaning making and just that authenticity. So meaning making and authenticity, right? What was there any point, whether it was in school or your personal life or any time so far, that you'd like to share that you realized, okay, I got to be myself. Like my authenticity matters in this situation. And if I do abandon that, then it would put me at risk for something I don't want to happen.
Yeah. uh, I'm somebody who had to do a lot of faking it in my life in order to survive. I think that's true for a lot of people that have experienced any kind of trauma. You can't be running around like being traumatized. Like you kind of have to like you need to wear the mask so you can get the job and the girlfriend or the boyfriend or the partner or the friends, and then I think there's a lot of that in my life, and I that became the norm for me. How do I which costume am I going to put on today so that I can actually get from the doorway over there to work or over to this party, or when an inside I'm just crumbling and I don't want to be around people at all, and I just would rather just go be a hermit somewhere in a cottage in the middle of nowhere in the mountains. My husband and I joke about this because he knows how I am, and I am like that. And I think I had to find someone that would allow me to like really be who I am. And I it kind of bothers me because so part of me is like, why did I have to, be in a marriage with a dude for me to like self actualize? And I think part of it was the first time, it was the first relationship besides my mother son relationship where someone really knows me. My kid knows me really well, right? My kid knows me better than I know them. I mean, they're almost 30, so it's like I don't know who they are anymore, but I still like them. But my kid knows me real well, and those only two people I've ever been vulnerable with, my husband and my child. And I don't think I realized that until I realized that I was vulnerable with my husband. But I ended up being in this relationship in the same way I've gone through life, which is just I'm just going to go for it and pretend and so I can survive. And then found myself years later going, oh, I'm actually like totally being myself with this person. And so a lot of my anxiety just started to kind of go away. And it was weird because I thrive on anxiety, right? That's like clinically, right? Like that's
We're getting good at
part
this.
of my
Yeah.
diagnosis. It's not that that anxiety totally went away, but I don't have anxiety in my own home anymore when I did before. So I think it really took being vulnerable in a safe environment and being able to just like say what I want before. And this goes back to like not really knowing if someone else is self actualized until you are, because I didn't realize how much my life had been like fear driven for years, like forever, until I didn't have to be scared anymore. So suddenly it's like, oh, I can sleep. Oh, I can eat. Oh, I can, do good things for myself, like do yoga every day without, worrying about whether, I'm interfering with someone else's schedule. That self actualization really has come with my marriage, not because of Marcus, but because of the environment that Marcus and I have created for one another. And it works both ways. It's the same for both of us. And I think, we've been together for years now and it's still a learning experience, but we get to have a relationship that's based on learning, right? So I think that you get into a position, however your path there, mine happened to be like with a guy, which is just so weird. I'm like, why did it take a man to, teach me how to be myself? When it didn't. It was just like the environment that we created for one another. But I think that that's been really good. And you know, I also work for an organization that's been through a lot of ups and downs and personality changes. And I definitely feel now like good in my job. Like I feel like I'm supported, which is new for me, not just at CSU Global, but you know, at any job, really. So those two things have been really helpful. And I'm sure like partly it's me just growing and being a
Yeah, well, it's all one package usually. It's hard to nitpick those things out from their interconnectedness with each other as far as your experience go, like where you might have learned something, but the environment part, oof, yeah, our last episode we just put out, we had touched for the first time on when changes are to occur inside of someone's internal being, right? Um, usually in the helping services, like it's creating an environment that is welcoming to that, right? Were you taught how to create those spaces, or were you just kind of forced to figure it out on your own?
I think a little from column A and a little from column, to be honest, because yes, we're all taught that stuff, and we eventually we learned that none of it works unless you can read a room, and so it got you got to learn how to read the room. You just have to. You like, don't. It's hard to teach. It's hard to have relationships. It's hard to do human services work. It's hard to run meetings unless you can read the room. And that's not just it's body language, it's facial expressions, it's those kinds of things. To you really have to understand the community that you're serving, the community that you're in the room with, no matter who that is, whether that's like at a punk rock show or whether it's a academic advisors meeting or students or whatever. You have to learn how to read the room. And I think that those tools are only as good as our ability to understand our communities that we're trying to communicate with. Because otherwise, this just goes back to being being a kid in the system and relating to people who had been where I was, right? Versus people are like, literally we had a counselor that she carried a textbook under her arm. And to me, that became a metaphor for the unwoke human services people. I mean, she was trying, her heart was in the right place. I believe she wanted to help us, but it was like, okay, let me find the end. Like, if you're not in the index, what do I do? Right. And so so I think she had all the tools, but she didn't know how to read a room. She didn't know who we were. She didn't know how to figure out who we were. She didn't know how to talk to us. She didn't know how to listen to us. And so I think, that's my answer.
We are grateful for you tuning in to this episode of Roundtable Discussions podcast. You can find previous talks on our YouTube page. Just search NOHS Organization and click subscribe. All of our social media handles can be found in the description box below. And of course, there is a ton more to learn and do on our website, nationalhumanservices.org.